segments of the government aren't able to come to an agreement with one another, aren't able to discuss rationally, then I suppose you have to use some tactics. What they are and how badly they affect the country, becomes something to question.
I think that I would seriously examine the use of either there's something there must be really wrong with the system if people can't sit down. I mean, if it takes 2 hours before the deadline to come to an agreement, which could have been reached 3 months ago, I think this it's becoming. I hope it's not becoming, but it seems to be becoming a political tool to rile up supporters for the next election. I mean, I don't know if the Democrats, I'm sure, have their tacticians as well as the Republicans.
Oh, sure. Well, it's the system we have, where we have equal parts of the government can vie with one another. That's our system. The checks and balances of the United States.
Right.
So from that point of view, it's almost expected that you're going to have this kind of situation. So how to get through that? I don't think Congress or the president knows how to get through that.
Well, let me ask you this: when I hear shutdown, I hear particularly, I think it would be the debt limit, which in the past has gone up and up and up and up. It's been always approved, and now it's being used as a mechanism to get certain policies.
I've lost you. Can't hear you.
Hello, can you hear me, Norman? Hello? Can you hear me? I cannot hear Norman. I can see him.
You can't hear me?
Now I can hear you. Hello.
Hi there.
So I kind of lost the train of my thought, but what I'm trying to, I think, say was that there are certain things within the Congress that they can do that would allow discussion and would allow brinksmanship, but not at the cost of putting the country in further debt through costs of paying unemployment or whatever the cost of shutting the government down. I mean, it can be used, it should be used maybe in the extreme, but when it comes to budget dealing, or when it comes to deal where you're not adding any, you're giving you're making sure that you have enough money to pay the debt that's already in existence. And but I think that in civil matters, like for instance, extremes like in Syria, but in a way you are in a country where you are being oppressed, maybe there are scenarios where I would support a government shutdown, but not for this budget crisis. I don't know. Do you think that the debt ceiling should be part of this discussion at all? Norman.
Yeah, let me see if I can answer you. Well, yes, the debt ceiling is certainly part of a discussion when it comes to budgetary policy. It seems to me that the country, the government, everybody is pretty certain they don't want to keep on accumulating total debt. And the way to do it, it can be done through discussion, through reasonable discussion. But the question is, are there enough reasonable congressmen that will allow that to happen? And clearly, they are not until the nth minute, until the final minute. The 11th hour. So Cruz and his folks stood on principle up to a point, and then they blinked, and now we've got the can being kicked down the road. And December 13th is a new deadline for Congress to do what it's supposed to do,
right,
which is to consider a budget. And go forward from there. That requires committee meetings, analysis from the various agencies. I mean, they've done this all before. This is nothing new. They've done it before, and they haven't been able to do it. Bowles-Simpson committee, super committee, and all that, which wasn't a Congress issue, but seemed reasonable. They've got a framework. Congress should, according to reasonable people, would sit down and discuss how to go ahead and use that framework or a similar framework, obviously, and then reconcile it, Senate and House reconciliation, and then the president will sign it.
But I think that having the debt ceiling as a discussion point, I think it is more disruptive than really talking about the budget, because the debt ceiling, it's being used to pay our debt, and if the debt is considered to be too high, then discussions should be not on the debt ceiling but on the budget, which creates the debt. And I'm thinking that when I heard the topic government shutdown, that was one of the things that really, because they use that tactic instead of other countries where they have a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan in some countries, or at least a 3-year plan. I don't know what the European Union, I'm sure it's more than a year plan. I think it's like a 5-year plan. Countries are more able to create commerce between. I think that's one of the problems right now is are large companies going to invest in the United States during this 3-month time when there's negotiation? And again, we have got the same problem with the debt ceiling being part of the budget. We have social issues which are also are part of the budget, or some, at least to some people, some of the issues are social, not just budgetary. But I was curious one thing. You have an accent, and I just wanted to know have you some English blood in you, or are you from the Northeast? Is that
Probably. No, I'm originally from South Africa. I'm a certified public accountant, and I'm retired, but I've obviously had a lot of budgetary experience in corporations that I ran, and I also have a degree. I have a degree in mathematics and a minor in economics and another major in stats. So, I'm very familiar with the budget process. I mean, when I say the debt ceiling is nothing more than a talking point, but it's an aim. I mean, if you want it, you've got to start off with a budget that is at least 12 months in duration,
right?
And you aim for a debt ceiling. Perhaps every 3 months, every quarter, you'd pinpoint what your debt ceiling should be, and then you'd compare it with what it actually is, and so on. That's how you do your budgeting and your record keeping, and you check back to see if you're within budget. That's how normal good companies do their budgeting.
So every 6 months. So I mean, it's like
there's no reason why. Well, every 6 months.
I'm just wondering.
We used to do it every month. Yeah, every month a corporation would do that. Yeah. Go ahead.
It's. I'm just maybe more ignorant than anything when I ask why can't the debt limit have a period of, say, 2 years, and where you have a budget, and if you don't meet the budget, then you have consequences in the following year. But that has nothing, shouldn't have nothing to do with the debt that is incurred, unless whoever incurred it was done through fraud against the government. I don't see why it has to be reviewed so often. I am concerned with the way the money is spent and the way, but I also see where in the community I live in, their budget is an annual concern, but voted on a 2-year basis at times, and that I think because the budget and the debt ceiling is so often reviewed, it's used as a weapon and not used by people with brains to come up with something that can follow a predictable pattern. I mean, I just heard this morning, it was kind of an interesting, probably has nothing to do with this, but an interesting side was about Greenspan, what's his name? Mr. Greenspan, the former Secretary FDR, and economic advisor to several presidents, and he was talking about that one of the things that he learned is that you can actually graph volatility, which is the fear that existed, or the exuberance that existed in 2008. And it was just interesting that he was actually backtracking and showing where he sees where oversight was needed, but he didn't think at the time that it could be done statistically. Apparently, he now believes that it can be done, and that putting that, of course, you're dealing with the market, but the market is what runs the government as well. I mean, the market, when Mr. Greenspan was talking about the volatility in the market, he was talking about the either the angst of pulling all your money out because you have fear of a crash, or the greed of buying constantly with large volumes of one particular stock or one group of stocks, which moves the market in a particular direction, which may be a false sign. But anyway, I don't want to take up any more. I'd like to hear some response, maybe.
Well, yeah. Well, Greenspan, I wouldn't concern myself with Greenspan terribly. I mean, the discussion is really about the government and it's the way it goes to budget and the way it should go to budget, and we can talk about that. I mean, the peripheral areas of taxation, the economy, all those things, the government has set the environment for that through its laws and regulations. But there's no reason at all, of course, why the government shouldn't be able to come together once a year. May take a couple of months to get the data and to get the various committees within the Congress to decide on what the budget should be and what the debt limit should be and so on, and make their projections and then aim for those numbers, bearing in mind that you've got income tax considerations, you've got all that data that the various agencies have at their fingertips to be used in those projections. Well, the problem I see is that Congress is filled with a lot of lawyers and a lot of people who don't really have a good grasp on finance. There are some people who do, and there are a lot of people who don't, and they're probably in the majority. And they're not since they do not have an idea of how these things work, you get this kind of mess occurring. So, I don't know that there's an easy solution. If you had one party in the majority in both houses, and you had a president who was of that party, like certainly South Africa, then you're going to have everything done the way that party wants it done. But we don't have that, and I'm not even sure if that's a good idea. I've got to believe that Congress will figure it out eventually. What they did was, of course, they had the sequestration
Right.
that created an unfortunate situation in some respect, but it certainly did cut back on expenses, and it'll go into effect again. And I think maybe the Republicans have hopefully learned their lesson that they can't do anything about Obamacare, and that's a separate topic. So that's going to just stand the way it is. What they have to agree on, which they do agree on, both parties do agree that they have to do something about the total debt. And it boils down to some increase in tax revenues and some reduction in expenses. The Democrats obviously want equal parts of both. If you're going to have a reduction in expenses, you've got to have an increase in taxation, one for one. That's what the Democrats want. That's what the president wants. That seems reasonable. The Republicans don't want any more taxation. I can understand that too. So there's going to be some sort of compromise if there's going to be success. Otherwise, they're going to just keep on doing, the kicking of the can, continuing resolutions, and so on and so forth. I think looking looking to the future. I mean, I think the United States has pretty much got a rosy picture as far as the economy is concerned because of independence from the Middle East as far as oil is concerned. They've got all the natural gas. We've got all the natural gas we need. We've got new oil reserves and so on. So I think the future looks pretty good, frankly. The question then is, can the government get it together?
Right. And again, to me, I think negotiating a budget can be easy.
And I think they will eventually. It's just taking too long.
But I think that handling the debt ceiling issue every 3 months is ridiculous. If you can handle a budget every year, you can handle a debt ceiling every year. They can have reports. You can do reports. I used to be a stockbroker, so I understand you have to make reports. But I don't believe that debt ceiling. I mean, President Reagan often raised the debt ceiling when it was needed. And most of the time, I don't think there's been ever a problem. And only in recent time, it's been used as a weapon to stop the complete process that you're talking about. About the House and the Senate having their own committees, subcommittees. They have their own hearings. They hear the reports from the different departments in the government. They look at their financial, compare that to the GEO reports. I think that all is in discussion when you make a budget. But and the debt ceiling is tied to it, but I don't think it should be as loosely tied. I mean, I think it should be re-examined maybe every year versus every 3 years, every 3 months. That's where I see, and that's why they use that then as a weapon to block everything.
Yeah, well, I agree with you. I don't think the debt ceiling should be something that they need to vote on. It should be automatically done that if you go over the debt ceiling, it needs to be raised. But I think that reviews of the budget against actual should be done on a regular basis, if not monthly, at least quarterly. But look, I mean, that's all reasonable stuff. If you own a condo, which you might do down in Florida or something, you have a condo association, and that's how condo associations work. And there's no reason why the government shouldn't work that way, or why the city shouldn't work that way. The cities work that way too. So yeah, I mean, it seems pretty simple to people like you and I. But when you have ideology sticking its nose in there, then you're going to have these kinds of problems because, oh, we don't like Obamacare. Look, I don't like Obamacare either. I don't. But to say, well, oh, Mr. President, we've decided we're not going to let you. We're not going to raise the budget ceiling because we don't like your Obamacare. So, we're not going to fund it, and we want to repeal it, and so on. That's BS, frankly, in my opinion, and you shouldn't be doing that. Obamacare will fail, or when the Republicans come in, they'll repeal it. That's just another a separate discussion, nothing to do with the budget, nothing to do with actual results.
Actually, I agree. It has nothing to do with the budget.
It's ideology. Except
it's ideology, and it's been used in this last budget crisis as a tactic or as an excuse. It has nothing to do with the budget, but it's been used that way, and that's what's so frustrating, at least in my view. And I agree with you that quarterly reviews, just like the SEC does with corporations, they can do introspective looking into how the U.S. government is running its affairs. With the computer age, it shouldn't be that difficult anymore. I think it was a lot more difficult when Lincoln was president to know that the president spent some money for lunch. Now, today, you know about it 30 seconds after it's happened.
Well, here's a question from Max. Max has a question, I believe. I've just noticed it now.
Yeah, I saw that.
He says, I'll read it out. How difficult, Norman, would it be to reforms entitlements? Well, entitlements like Social Security is probably pretty easy to reform. That's not shouldn't be difficult. You increase the age.
Okay, all right. Okay, in that way it is easy. But you need a pass.
So Medicare on the other hand might not be that easy because that really, I think, has some sort of there's an impact there of our situation in the United States to do with healthcare that makes that difficult. You've got an aging population. You've got very expensive healthcare in the United States for all kinds of reasons, and that impacts the cost of Medicare, as well as the fact that you've got a demographic that involves people coming on like us, and many more coming on every day. That's a difficult one. Go ahead.
I would wish to ask you an entitlement and an adjustment in the tax code. Does the entitlement can be changed by Congress, but the tax code? No, it's the other way around. I think the entitlements can be done individually, and that the tax code is going to be done through Congress.
What do you mean by the entitlements can be done individually? What do you mean by that?
I'm looking at Max's question. He was talking about how difficult it would be to reform entitlements or adjust the tax code. So he's asking, what to me, which is harder to do, the changing of the tax code or getting rid of entitlements?
Oh, I see. Well, he's saying it's a two-part question, so each part is separate from the other.
Okay.
They're sort of exclusive from one another, I think.
But what I'm trying to
entitlements.
How are entitlements changed, and how are tax codes changed? How are entitlements reforms? How is that different from changing the tax code? What mechanism do you have to go through to reform entitlements?
I believe you would have to go through. Well, with entitlements, essentially, it's almost like pensions in a way. People who are already on Medicare are going to retain their benefits. I think the proposal is by Congress, or some in Congress, notably Paul Ryan, is saying for people who will 10 years out from Medicare will keep those benefits, but people younger than that will have to change the age that they get it, and so on. Plus some other some other things like savings accounts and so on, tax-deductible savings accounts. So yeah, Congress has to do that, or would do that, would do something about changing entitlements. That again, that's probably relatively easy to do if you have a decent healthcare system for all folks in the United States, and Obamacare is trying to do that.
I'm sorry.
Beg your pardon?
I was trying to ask, doesn't some of the health, either not the Obamacare, but let's say the health code that exists now before Obamacare, isn't that also aren't they entitlements?
Which health code are you talking about? Medicaid?
Obamacare.
Well, Obamacare is a mishmash of all sorts of things. But, you know, and one has a view on healthcare. I mean, he's trying to make it universal. I don't think personally you were a stockbroker. You probably still have stocks. We all do. I don't like the idea of having to rely on corporations to provide healthcare. And even insurance companies, it's questionable. If you could provide the same kind of thing that you have in Medicare to everybody in the United States and adjust the taxes to cover that cost and let the corporations forget about paying for health care, that's my personal opinion. That's universal health care, one payer. That, to me, is the only sensible way of providing health care for the United States citizens. And they should have it, but in my opinion. But, you know, that's a totally... whether will we get there? Well, we couldn't get to the metric system, so there's nothing to make me believe we'll get to universal health care.
But I have also noticed that the Germans and the Brits have moved more away from the socialized medicine. They are moving away from the universal benefits that they had in the past. I know people who lived in Germany who had a great pension and they paid a lot, which was never paid for here. But after the unification of Germany, there was such an influx that they had to change. And I think even in the Netherlands it's changed. The universal retirement isn't anymore as it used to be. And
well, change is inevitable. But, you know, you go to the Canadian system, you go to the Israeli healthcare system, they have a two-tier system. They have basic healthcare, but better than basic healthcare. And then you can pay your own premiums and get enhanced healthcare and so on if you pay for it yourself. And we have that with Medicare. So, you know, that seems like a reasonable way to go. But, you know, he's gone. Okay. I'm not sure why. But that's okay. Max, I think... Can you hear me, Max? I guess you can. I don't see why I can't.
This sometimes happens. I don't know. If this happens again, I'll just reboot and come back on.
Yeah. We're pretty much in agreement, Max, on most things, but I think the reason why we're doing this is to assist in testing the system, which I guess has got a few bugs in it, right?
Yeah.
Not as many as the healthcare system.
Well, let me ask you about that. Yeah, how long had you lived in South Africa? When did you come to America? Let me ask you this.
I came to the United States in let's see, gosh, I can't remember now. It's I think 1980.
Okay, so
yeah.
What kind of health system did they have in South Africa, and how would you compare it with today and the United States system?
No, the South African system when I was there was a privileged system.
Was that what part?
You got the best health. Yeah, you got the best health care if you were a white person, or at least an honorary white.
What about now?
Which I probably was.
What about now?
The system has deteriorated. Back then, as it is now, if you were impoverished, you could still go you could get medical care from great hospitals. You didn't have to go to the emergency room. You could get medical care from very good hospitals, and you would be put on a sliding scale depending on your income in terms of how you would pay for it. So if you couldn't pay for it, that would be it. Today I'm not sure how it works. I know that the hospitals are overflowing. They can't cope. The medical care has deteriorated. But if you have money, which is true in anywhere in the world, you can get good health care because there are good doctors there. Yeah. And it's just a question of spending the money to get the health care you want.
Do you think there's a lot of?
They do have.
Do you think there's a lot of?
They do
in healthcare here in the United States, and where it's a hard question to ask because it's a hard question to get.
No, not really. I don't think it's a hard question in one sense because my partner in life, she was a corporate general counsel for a very large healthcare system. So I learned some stuff from her, but essentially there's a lot of duplication because you can have two hospitals vying with very intuitive surgical, for example, right?
Right.
Intuitive surgical has invented the robotic Da Vinci system. So you've got two hospitals having two of these pieces of equipment, very expensive, millions and millions of dollars worth of equipment, never fully utilized by either. And then you have, that's a waste. That's an absolute waste of money. But there's plenty of waste.
Is that happening?
That's what
happening all over the world. In any society, do you see a society where you visited where you did not see that kind of waste?
Not that kind of waste. That's excessive waste. I'm sure there's waste in every system. We have waste in our military expenditure. But no.
We have hospitals. Let's say that we have hospitals here where I live. At least 6 hospitals that have MRI and CT scans, and I mean, so it does approach what you said. But anyway, the over expenditure of equipment by hospitals, not taking into consideration the demographics of their clientele, the need. I think that is wasteful. And there is a bigger issue again, and people will want to know if it's going to add costs, medical costs, but that's dealing with mental health issues, which to me I think is an issue totally ignored because it's either categorized as a mass shooting, or it's or PTS, and it's sort of put in someone is put on a shelf and forgotten. But those are issues. The mental health issue is an important issue, which I think in the long run affects the whole society. If you have lots of sick people out there with PTSD, or otherwise, and they're not being treated, it is a threat to society.
Well, yes, these are big topics. I always like to quote a personal trainer who always says, when you're looking to have a diet, she doesn't believe in diets per se. She believes in eating moderately, everything in moderation. So you know, we do things in excess in the United States. We fight too many wars. That creates PTSD, creates a strain on the medical system. You know, all those kinds of things have consequences in the end. And we don't think through things sufficiently. It's called critical thinking. You've heard of that. And we obviously aren't being taught that, or weren't taught that 30 years ago when these folks are in Congress. So we'll get through it because we're a pretty resilient country and we've got a lot of resources. And we'll eventually get through it, I do believe. And we're better off than most of the rest of the world. You know, by 2050, half the world will be living in shanty towns anyway. And hopefully none of ours will be, you know.
May I say that I think would you say in the majority of the world has governments like Parliament, like I don't know if like Canada, the parliamentary kind of election, where you have, I think in Israel, you have a parliamentary election where you have do you see healthcare handled differently by different societies and their method of governance?
Well, look, I mean, China has got 1.3 billion people. The Muslim world has something similar, 1.3 billion people. That's almost half the total world population. The British Commonwealth is pretty big as well. It includes India and Pakistan and all those countries, and they model themselves on the English system. Is there any one country that stands out as being a good model as far as I'm concerned? I'm only really familiar with the British system, which isn't bad. It has some definite advantages in that you vote for a party. It may be a two-party system, maybe a three-party system, but essentially you're voting for a party and its platform. They get into government and they run the show until you decide, well, they're not doing a good enough job, and then you try the other guys. Look, I mean, America's been pretty successful. It's the most successful country in the world. Now, so who's next? China, maybe, but China has abject poverty. They run the show with just one party in power, a bunch of elitists that are in power, yes, and they're doing their best to run their country and lift their people out of poverty. But we're still number one in many ways, in lots of ways. In individual ways, whether it's healthcare or you know, we brought down somewhat by a segment of our population that is struggling, and we don't seem to do much to try and get them out of that situation. And I don't know, you know, it's difficult because that, you know, now we're talking about employment, and it's become more difficult to find jobs for all kinds of reasons, nothing to do with politics. So that's just another topic, and we're way off topic here, right? We're way off topic.
Yeah, but it does give you a better understanding, knowing how other countries run and how. I mean, you have ministers in England, I'm sure, so they're political appointees. But I think in Britain, I don't know if this is true, but do you have every week, one day of the week, where there's a vote of confidence for the government? And if the government loses, they have then they have elections. Whereas here, it's every 4 years, and the Congress can't just say, well, no, let's have an election. We have to wait 4 years or 8 years, but
well, if you have a clear majority in Parliament in the UK or anywhere where there's a parliamentary system, if you have a clear majority, a vote of no confidence is not going to go anywhere. So it doesn't really matter. It's just like it's better than you got to have a clear majority. Obviously, in Israel, you've got a coalition, and you can have difficulty there. But for the last few number of years, they've pretty much had a strong coalition to the right. But no, I'm not. I think if a government is voted in that's weak, and we're kind of weak in the same sense, then a vote of no confidence can, make the government have to call for another election. That's true. But Canada doesn't seem to have that problem. Britain doesn't have that problem now because they have clear majorities. In Australia, I don't think they have that problem because they also have a clear majority. But they have voted. They have voted their previous government out of power and tried the next one and so on.
I see that it is a benefit to, I think, the minority to have a voice. I'm sure that there is criticism to having a confidence vote every week or every month. I know in Israel it's every week. So, but, it keeps the government on its toes. I think that inequality in government here, it's just unthinkable. It's so gross that when I heard that people who were employed by the government, who were furloughed, who were on unemployment, are going to be able to keep their unemployment as well as their back salary. I think it's a travesty, and it makes me a lot more not trusting what comes out or what they choose to take out of a budget. It almost seems like it's being run by politicians and not by economists or accountants.
Oh well, that's true. That's true. And lawyers. Yes.
Lawyers and interest groups. You got more, and a lot of interest groups.
Sure.
I think there are more lawyers and lobbyists in Washington D.C. than there are congressmen or senators.
Well, it's been interesting. I think we pretty much agree on virtually most things here, Raphael. Are you in Florida?